Welcome to the Ariston Group. We simplify business complexity.
Well,
Hi, I'm Suren Mudli, Group Managing Director for Ariston. With me today is Keith Barrett, our Financial Services Director, and Reginald Pillay, CEO. Reg, let's start with you. Tell me about where Ariston started. How did it all begin?
It began as a concept. So, having worked in corporate, I saw that advice could be easily attained by large corporates because they had the money and the budget for it, but the same advice wasn't being given to the small and medium sector, and it was largely because they couldn't afford it. So the idea was to build a company that would provide advice and almost simplify business to in the SME sector rather than that being only available to large corporates. A group of friends got together, we conceptualized the idea, never really went anywhere because we all had day jobs, and then eventually I took the plunge and decided that I was going to try this on my own, and I wouldn't say bought them out, but they moved on, and Ariston was born. We had conceptualized the name Ariston because we were playing with the helmet and Aristotle and tried to look at names that sort of were synonymous with those kind of things, the helmet being like warrior and strength, so we'd carry your battle for whatever you were doing, and then so that's how that came about. But then the name Ariston came along, and as you know, it was Ariston Financial Services for quite a long time, and that gave birth to what's Ariston Group today.
Okay. Keith, when did you join Ariston?
I joined in 2011. I did not come from a professional background. In fact, I came from a job where I was the financial manager. And at the time, I was looking for something new, and Reg came along and was offering that something new, and that is to, in essence, kind of restart Ariston as a business, which had started in Durban, but now we wanted to kind of restart it, rebrand it in Johannesburg. So, yeah, that we met up, we had a discussion on kind of how we would go about doing that, and probably about a month later, we met up in our new offices in Kempton Park, and started seeing clients. Funny enough, I already had someone that we could visit, a lead, and obviously Reg had some existing clients that were Joburg based that we could also tap into, and from those small beginnings, we have what we have today.
Okay, fantastic. How long ago was that?
12 years.
Yeah, 12 years.
12 years.
12 years now.
And Ariston is 16 years old this year.
Yeah, in January.
Okay, fantastic. In 2014, after a year of having started my own business, and prior to that, spending quite a few years in corporate, I joined Ariston, and with that came new beginnings, a new name, a new trajectory. Reg, tell me, what were your thoughts in terms of this new adventure?
Well, I think it was exciting and daunting at the same time. At that stage, Ariston was 7 years old. So, we hadn't really ventured much out of the financial space. So it was evident that the name Ariston Financial Services didn't need to change up to that point. But then we were looking at how do we create a business that was more rounded in offering a all-round service to an entrepreneur, not just financial services. So we had to change the name to be able to encapsulate the diverse service offering. But it was daunting because I had taken on a partner with Keith, but Keith and I, a year after we had become partners, became family really, literally. And so I was taking on a partner. I didn't really know the person, but it became very evident, and I always go back to a client meeting that we had together out in Vereeniging, where we're just sitting and watching how you and I collaborated in that meeting. Made me realize that there was no way we could do this as two individuals or two individual businesses. And it was very evident that we had to do it together. And so, I'm sure you remember, we sat on a whiteboard, we wrote Ariston, we said we never want to lose that element of the brand, but we came up with the second half of that name had many iterations. And then we settled on global, because the idea then was for us to take a global view or taking Ariston global, having global view of Ariston, and saying that it would become a global company, which at the time in 2014 was a big, hairy, audacious goal. But like Keith said earlier on, look at us today. We operate in 3 countries with physical presence. We operate probably in about 8 or 9 countries where we have footprint. So, the global lived itself and is now but one company within the group. So it's been an exciting journey. Still is a bit daunting.
I prefer the word adventure. Never a dull moment. Keith, tell me, what do you see as Ariston's value proposition? What differentiates Ariston from similar service providers, if there are any?
I'm not sure that they are. One of the things that differentiates us, and the reason why I say I'm not sure they are, is the sort of wide spectrum of the services that we offer. But even before we got to the point where you joined and our service offering kind of broadened even more than what it was, our approach seemed to be different. Where our interest was not just to crunch numbers, it was always to understand the client, become partners with the client, and in so doing be in a position to advise them on how to grow their business, how to make good decisions in general, which has led to our growth in no small part, because as our clients have grown, we've kind of grown with them. So yeah, that's kind of how I would see us differentiating ourselves. These days, we've kind of taken it to the next level, where with us being a group, we've now even entered into other areas of technology support, and rolling out accounting systems, stock systems, and all that sort of thing for our clients. We're looking at, from an Ariston Capital point of view, we're looking at helping clients find finance and, get the most value out of their business, but also bridge those gaps when they are, struggling. They've got a big contract, where they get the money to buy the necessary raw materials in order to deliver on that contract and grow their business. So it's all about seeing a need out there and ultimately making sure that we can fulfill it for our clients.
Reg, tell me some interesting stories about clients over the years.
So one was actually I had a conversation today with a client and a supplier at the same time. Our IT supplier has been our IT supplier since 2013, so that's 10 years that we've had him provide us IT and connectivity services. And we were chatting today about how he helped network a portion of my house in 2013 when Keith and I moved out of the offices in Kempton Park to the house because it was cheaper. And we networked my house so we would have network phones. And how we were 2 people or 3 people at that point sitting in 2 bedrooms that we tried to make look like offices. And 10 years later, our head office is in 1,100 square meter building in the heart of Bryanston. And he was just saying, if you think about how you'll have grown in the last 10 years from 2 rooms in a townhouse to a building on your own in Bryanston, what phenomenal growth is that? And that's just one of the offices. That's not taking into account the office in Cape Town, Mauritius, Botswana. Very interesting.
It's really exciting looking back at the journey. Sometimes you don't realize what you achieved until you've reflected where you've come from and what you've actually done. And the lives that have been touched in terms of the employees that have been supporting us and growing with Ariston, most of which were there from the beginning, some of which have left, experienced life and returned, which is quite interesting. But it's exciting at the same time because it shows that we are doing something right in that regard. So, as a business, we've been impacted, and I would say positively, quite significantly, by technology and technological developments in our space. A lot of what we do is very traditional services, but technology has brought in opportunities and has enabled and facilitated improvements in productivity and so on. Tell me a little bit about that.
With the advent of, I've been in this business for a long time, and that is the business of financial things, accounting and so on. When I started, the great advent was just simply having a personal computer and being able to process things on Excel. Well, it was Lotus 123 at the time, I think. But these days, where the real advancement is happening is in terms of machine learning and the automation that is achieved by that. And, accountants are very slow in changing, I think, but finally they're realizing that actually, computers can do a lot of the kind of data processing that we deal with quite easily and without the human error that often creeps in. So that's why we partnered as a practice with Xero, because Xero Accounting offers us that machine learning, the what one would call robotic process automation, which allows for kind of an automation of a lot of the processing that happens. And we've used that to basically free up time for our accountants so that they're not so worried about, making sure that the bank balances, but rather, all those transactions in the bank, what do they mean? And once we understand, well, what does this mean, how do we now interpret it, as it were? How do we present it to our clients so that it makes sense to them, so that it adds value, so that they learn something about their business that they didn't already know? Because if you go to them with a set of management accounts and tell them your sales is R1 million, well, tell me something I didn't know already. What technology is allowing us to do is not only the analytics that allows us to see where we can add value, but frees up our time to be able to actually, sit with our clients and spend more time with them instead of in front of a TV screen or a computer screen.
Reg, so beyond the strategy, advisory, accounting, HR solutions that we traditionally provide, a lot of clients are making inquiries in terms of local and international trusts. Can you elaborate what are the benefits of having a local or international trust and the services Ariston provides in that regard?
So Ariston Capital is a business that looks at it's a deal-making business, transactional advice, but it also does both personal and corporate restructuring. And in the restructuring part of that, we look at local and offshore trusts. Now, why a local trust or why an offshore trust? They're fundamentally for different things. If you look at a local structure, there are two certainties in life, they say, and that's death and taxes. And unfortunately, in South Africa, death causes a lot of taxes. So we have a fairly high estate duty. And so if you look at how does one protect their legacy, how does one protect their wealth, and how does one create continuity for their families while reducing the burden of estate duty, a trust structure is the best vehicle to do it in. Now I say a trust structure, not necessarily a trust, because there are pros and cons with everything you do. Trusts are not the most tax efficient vehicles, but if you structure the estate depending on everybody's individual or the client's individual need, if you structure the estate correctly, you could get tax benefit while creating asset protection, wealth protection, legacy protection, and ultimately continuity. Because a trust would never die. The structure would never die. So it helps the patriarch or the matriarch to be able to continue what they envisaged for their family in perpetuity. So that's ultimately why it set up a local trust. An offshore trust is, there's a lot of uncertainty in the world, not just in South Africa, but in the world. So people would like to look at how they can diversify their assets. How do I prevent all my eggs from being in one basket? Entrepreneurs predominantly will operate out of one country. We took a view to go global, and that's very out the box thinking as an entrepreneur. But entrepreneurs generally hone their skill and then they operate in one country, and I've seen a trend over the last couple of years where people are looking at diversifying. How do I get a second passport? How do I create wealth outside of South Africa? And so our Mauritius office sets up offshore structures where your wealth will be in part kept or will reside in Mauritius through the offshore structure. That structure is still very linked to the South African structure. The requisite taxes are paid, and with the DTA or the double tax agreement that we have between the two countries, it is tax efficient because of the tax agreement between the two countries. There is common reporting between the two countries. So the structure allows for timeous, accurate, and compliant reporting to the revenue authorities, but it also allows you to hold your money in another currency, in another jurisdiction, and to create wealth outside of the country, to build a revenue base or a base outside of the country. So that's predominantly that's the main reason we open offshore trusts, people looking at how to diversify their asset, and then there are people that are looking at getting a second passport or buying property outside of South Africa to create secondary income. But the predominantly the reason is to diversify their wealth.
Thank you for watching. please follow us on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook, or contact us by going to our website, www.ariston.global.